Graceland Recording Studio, Memphis, Tennessee, January 12, 1975. Sunday evening, 9:45 p.m. The makeshift recording studio in the basement of Graceland hums quietly with electronic equipment, but tonight it feels different, charged with an energy that has nothing to do with amplifiers or mixing boards. Elvis Presley sits alone on a wooden stool, his acoustic guitar resting across his knees, surrounded by the intimate recording space he created to capture his most personal musical moments away from the commercial pressures of professional studios. At 40 years old, Elvis finds himself drawn increasingly to gospel music, the spiritual foundation that has anchored his musical journey since childhood in the Assembly of God Church in Tupelo. Tonight, like many recent nights, he's come to his private studio to explore the sacred songs that feed his soul in ways that his Vegas performances and Hollywood soundtracks never could. The studio is sparse but functional. A few microphones, a 4-track recorder, basic mixing equipment, and religious imagery that reflects Elvis's deepening spiritual search. A wooden cross hangs on one wall. Beside it, a painting of Jesus that Elvis commissioned from a local artist. Bibles in multiple translations sit on a table near the recording console, their pages marked with annotations in Elvis's handwriting. Elvis begins playing a gentle melody on his guitar, something that emerged during his private prayer time earlier that evening. The song has no words yet, just a haunting melody that seems to carry the weight of longing, of searching, of a soul reaching towards something beyond the material world that has given him everything and somehow left him feeling empty. As he plays, Elvis closes his eyes and lets the music flow through him without forcing it, allowing the melody to develop naturally as he's learned to do during these late-night sessions. The basement studio becomes a sanctuary, a place where Elvis can strip away the performer's mask and connect with the spiritual truths that have always been more important to him than fame or fortune. The melody builds and Elvis begins to hum along, then softly vocalizes without words, letting his voice find its own path through the musical landscape. This is how his best gospel songs have always emerged, not through calculated composition, but through spiritual surrender, allowing something larger than himself to work through his voice and guitar. At exactly 10:17 p.m., Elvis becomes aware of a presence in the studio. Without opening his eyes, he knows he is no longer alone. The air in the room has changed, becoming charged with an energy that feels both peaceful and overwhelming, like the moment before a thunderstorm when the atmosphere itself seems to hold its breath. Elvis continues playing, but his heart begins racing as he senses someone moving quietly around the studio. He assumes it's one of the Memphis Mafia members checking on him, perhaps Red West or Charlie Hodge, though he hadn't heard footsteps on the basement stairs. "Don't stop playing," a voice says softly. "That melody is beautiful." The voice is unfamiliar, yet somehow the most familiar sound Elvis has ever heard. It carries an authority and warmth that reaches into the deepest parts of his consciousness, speaking to places in his soul that he's never been able to access through any earthly experience. Elvis opens his eyes slowly and sees a man standing near the recording console, watching him with eyes that seem to contain both infinite compassion and ancient wisdom. The figure appears to be in his early 30s, with shoulder-length brown hair and a beard, wearing simple white clothing that seems to generate its own gentle light. Every instinct tells Elvis that this is impossible, that what he's seeing cannot be real, but his spiritual intuition, developed through years of seeking and prayer and study, recognizes this presence immediately. The figure emanating love and peace in ways that transcend physical presence is Jesus Christ, standing in his basement recording studio on a Sunday night in Memphis. "I've been waiting to sing with you," Jesus says, his voice carrying the accent of no particular region, but somehow understanding every language, every heart. You've been calling to me through your music for years. Tonight I'm here to answer. Elvis's hands tremble on his guitar, but he doesn't stop playing. Part of his mind insists this must be a hallucination, a consequence of the prescription medications or the spiritual exhaustion that has been weighing on him. But his heart knows better. This encounter feels more real than anything he's experienced in his 40 years of life. "I don't understand," Elvis whispers, his voice barely audible above the gentle guitar melody he continues to play. "Why? Why are you here?" "Because music is one of my gifts to humanity," Jesus replies, moving closer to where Elvis sits. "And you've been using that gift to bring people closer to me, closer to love, closer to truth. Your gospel recordings, your spiritual searching, it's all been preparation for this moment." Jesus extends his hand toward the guitar, and Elvis understands the invitation. With shaking fingers, he hands the instrument to the figure before him, watching as Jesus takes the guitar with hands that bear no visible scars, but somehow carry the memory of ultimate sacrifice. When Jesus begins to play, the music that emerges is unlike anything Elvis has ever heard. It's the same melody Elvis was developing, but transformed into something that speaks directly to the soul without needing to pass through the ears. The notes seem to resonate in the air long after they're played, creating harmonies with themselves, building into a sound that encompasses all of creation's music. "Sing with me," Jesus says, and his voice as he begins to vocalize is like water to someone dying of thirst, like sunlight after endless darkness. The melody becomes a wordless hymn of praise, of gratitude, of recognition that everything beautiful in existence flows from a single divine source. Elvis joins in, his voice blending with Jesus's in perfect harmony, despite never having heard this song before. Their voices weave together like they've been singing as a duet for eternity, creating music that seems too sacred for human ears, too pure for earthly recording equipment. As they sing, Elvis feels his consciousness expanding beyond the basement studio, beyond Graceland, beyond Memphis, beyond Earth itself. The music carries him to a place where all creation joins in eternal worship, where every voice that has ever praised the divine blends into one cosmic chorus of love and gratitude. The recording equipment continues running, capturing this impossible session, though Elvis has forgotten entirely about the technical aspects of making music. This isn't about creating a product or preserving a performance. This is about participating in the fundamental creative force of the universe, joining the song that began before time and will continue after all earthly music fades to silence. For nearly 3 hours, Elvis and Jesus make music together. They sing traditional hymns that sound newly written, create original compositions that feel ancient, and explore musical territories that exist somewhere between heaven and earth. Elvis plays guitar, piano, and simply uses his voice, while Jesus seems to master every instrument effortlessly, sometimes playing multiple instruments simultaneously in ways that defy physical logic. During a quiet moment between songs, Elvis gathers the courage to ask the questions that have been burning in his heart for years. "Why do I feel so empty sometimes?" he whispers. "I have everything anyone could want, but I feel lost." "Because you're not meant for the small things," Jesus replies, setting down the guitar and looking directly into Elvis's eyes. "Your soul is too large for fame, too deep for material success. You've been given extraordinary gifts not for your own satisfaction, but to serve something greater." "But I don't feel worthy," Elvis confesses. "I make mistakes. I struggle with temptation. I disappoint people." Jesus smiles with the warmth of perfect understanding. "Worthiness isn't something you achieve, Elvis. It's something you accept. I didn't choose you because you're perfect. I chose you because your heart is large enough to love beyond yourself, and your voice is strong enough to carry that love to others. They returned to making music, but now Elvis sings with a deeper understanding of his purpose. His voice carries not just technical skill but spiritual authority, not just emotional expression but divine connection. Every note becomes a prayer, every song a bridge between heaven and earth. As the session continues, Jesus shares insights about music that revolutionize Elvis's understanding of his art. He explains that every song is either drawing people closer to love or pulling them away from it, that every performance is either healing souls or wounding them, that the power to influence hearts carries profound responsibility. When you sing gospel, Jesus tells him, you're not just performing, you're channeling divine love into a world that desperately needs it. When you sing from your heart, people don't just hear your voice, they hear the voice of their Creator calling them home. Near dawn, as the first light of Monday morning begins to filter through the small basement windows, Jesus prepares to leave. The recording equipment has been running throughout the night, capturing hours of the most beautiful music ever created. "Will I see you again?" Elvis asks, his heart breaking at the thought of returning to ordinary existence after this transcendent experience. "I'm always with you," Jesus replies, "but now you'll know it in a different way. Every time you sing from your heart, every time you use your gifts to serve love rather than self, I'm singing with you." Jesus embraces Elvis, and the physical touch feels like every blessing, every forgiveness, every moment of grace condensed into a single human gesture. Then he begins to fade, not dramatically but gently, like morning mist dissipating in sunlight. Elvis sits alone in his studio as the sun rises over Graceland, staring at the recording equipment that has captured the impossible. He rewinds the tape and plays it back, hearing his own voice clearly, but where Jesus's voice should be, there's only silence, as if the divine presence was too sacred to be preserved by earthly technology. Yet Elvis knows what he experienced. He knows who he sang with. He knows that the most beautiful music of his life was created in partnership with the source of all music, all love, all truth. Over the following weeks, Elvis listens to the recordings obsessively. To anyone else, it sounds like Elvis singing alone, sometimes harmonizing with himself, sometimes appearing to respond to an unheard voice. But Elvis can still hear both voices, can still feel the presence that transformed those 3 hours into the most meaningful of his life. The transformation in Elvis is immediately noticeable to those closest to him. Charlie Hodge notices that Elvis approaches gospel songs differently now. He sings them like he's been where the songs come from. Charlie tells other Memphis Mafia members, Elvis considers releasing some of the songs, thinking the world needs to hear music that was touched by divine presence. But every time he prepares to share the recordings publicly, something stops him. This music feels too sacred for commercial release, too personal for public consumption. Instead, Elvis keeps the tapes private, playing them during his most difficult moments, when he needs to remember who he really is beneath the celebrity persona. The recordings become his secret sanctuary, proof that his spiritual seeking led to the most real experience of his life. During private moments with trusted friends, Elvis tries to share what happened that January night, but the words never seem adequate. "I know how it sounds," Elvis tells his spiritual advisor Larry Geller, "but I know what I experienced. Jesus was there. We made music together." Word of the session doesn't spread beyond Elvis's innermost circle. The Memphis Mafia members notice changes in his demeanor. He seems more peaceful, more purposeful in his approach to gospel music, but Elvis protects the privacy of that night fiercely. During his final years, Elvis's gospel performances take on an almost otherworldly quality. When he sings Amazing Grace or How Great Thou Art, audiences sense they're witnessing more than entertainment. They feel the presence of someone who has touched the source of all music. The recordings remain in Elvis's private collection until his death in August 1977. After his passing, as his estate is catalogued, the tapes from that January night mysteriously disappear. No one knows who took them, where they went, or whether they still exist. Some believe the tapes were stolen by collectors. Others think Elvis himself destroyed them before his death, knowing that such sacred music shouldn't be commercialized. A few close to Elvis suspect that the recordings simply couldn't survive in the physical world, that music created in partnership with the divine was meant to exist only in the moment of its creation. But Elvis knew the truth that the missing tapes revealed. The most important music isn't captured on recording equipment. It's written on hearts, preserved in souls, and continues resonating long after the physical sounds fade to silence. In his final concerts, Elvis's gospel performances carry a different quality than before. When he sings, "He Touched Me" or "How Great Thou Art," audiences sense something beyond entertainment, beyond even spiritual expression. They feel the presence of someone who has touched the source of all music and carries that connection in every note. The session with Jesus changed Elvis in ways that no earthly success could match. It confirmed his understanding that his greatest gifts were spiritual rather than commercial, that his deepest purpose was serving divine love through music rather than achieving fame or fortune. Though the recordings vanished, the impact of that night echoed through Elvis's remaining years. He approached gospel music with new reverence, understanding that he wasn't just singing about God, he was singing with God, partnering with the creative force that gave birth to all melody, all harmony, all rhythm. The lost recording session with Jesus became Elvis's most treasured secret, the experience that validated his spiritual searching and confirmed his deepest suspicions about the sacred nature of music. In a life filled with extraordinary experiences, those 3 hours in his basement studio represented the most extraordinary of all, the moment when earthly talent touched heavenly truth and created something too beautiful for this world to contain. Somewhere, perhaps, those recordings still exist, waiting for the right moment, the right ears, the right hearts, to receive music that was born from the collaboration between human gift and divine grace. Until then, the echo of that impossible duet continues to resonate in every gospel song Elvis ever sang, every spiritual moment he shared through music, every heart that was touched by his voice, carrying the memory of singing with love itself. The greatest recording session in history was the one that was never meant to be shared, only experienced, only remembered, only carried forward as proof that the sacred and the earthly can meet in the space where music lives, where souls touch, where human voice joins the eternal song of creation in perfect, impossible, unforgettable harmony.